So Integrative Ruminations was founded as an education and management consulting outfit. Our vision is simply to analyze problems and create awareness. To that end, we seek to explore the social issues that confront our world and find ways to make us all better custodians of the world that we're blessed with. This is my life's cause, and I hope that that has been evident in what I try to do through Ruminations blog, the podcast, Ruminations with Oni-Eseleh, our international conferences, social media interviews, and webinars, such as the one that brings us all here today. None of this is possible without the participation and encouragement of others, like all of you who have joined us here today from across the United States, Canada, India, Nigeria, Ghana, and the United Kingdom. I thank you all. In the past year, the COVID pandemic has thrust our world into a situation that was hitherto unimaginable to any of us. I have found myself questioning orthodoxy in more ways than one. I have wondered about the last thoughts of so many of our fellow citizens of the world as they struggle to breathe before their lives are taken by COVID. I have wondered why so many of us have been spared, while so many others were not so lucky. And I know that it was not because we were better or more religious than those who died. I also know that when you're lying on your back, very sick from COVID, your life flashes before you. You may have plenty of time to think, and you may not. But as you wrestle with your symptoms, you wonder every night if that could be your last. Today, I am curious to know what life really means. I'm curious to know what living is from the perspectives of our panelists and also the perspectives of everyone present here today. And I also am curious to know how we can each make our lives as productive as possible so that we leave behind us all a legacy with which we could be proud when our lives flash before our eyes at a time when we can no longer effect any change. I also would like to know how it is that we can live so that if this is our last day, and if it were possible to look back at our lives after we're gone, we will be happy at what we see. So it is really my pleasure to introduce today some really wonderful men that I know, whose work I know, who really are just extremely qualified to have this discussion with us. The first panelist that I'd like to introduce is Reverend Dr. Hector Rivera. Dr. Rivera got his bachelor's degree from Lehman College here in New York, and also obtained one master's degree in history. The bachelor's degree was in philosophy and anthropology. And then he obtained a master's degree in history also from Lehman College in New York, and then went on to obtain a Master of Divinity at Drew University, and then a Doctor of Ministry also from Drew University. He has a very solid background in education, theoretical and practical theology, philosophy, history, preaching, and teaching. He is very knowledgeable in the area of interfaith, ecumenical, and multicultural ministries, and has several years of pastoral experience. And he's currently the pastor of St. Paul's United Methodist Church in Middletown, New York. Reverend Dr. Rivera, welcome.
Thank you, Ohiro. Thank you for the introduction and for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this symposium. Thank you.
I should also say happy birthday, because I know you just had a birthday several days ago, right?
I was hoping you would forget that, but yes.
No, we're talking about life. So let's
Very
celebrate it.
very happy birthday, Dr. Hector.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, happy birthday. So our other panelist has joined us all the way from India. Dr. Naresh Vats teaches English, Indian aesthetics and theory, film studies and communication skills in the University School of Humanities and Social Sciences at GGSIP University in New Delhi, India. He has traveled extensively within India and abroad, presented several research papers, given plenary talks, conducted workshops, and published several research articles. He has actually guided several PhD, MPhil, and master dissertations. His academic research interests include individual personality and society, media and communication skills. Dr. Vats, I know that you don't like to talk about your accomplishments. You just like to see yourself as a regular human being, just as a regular person. I've also seen you in a movie. And so thank you for being here. And you are a member of several professional bodies and on the editorial board of several academic journals. And I know that you have won several literary awards, but you just like to say that you're an aware citizen. I am sure that today you'll tell us what that means. But as an aware citizen, Dr. Vats does his bit to contribute to the betterment of society and humanity. He is committed to world peace, and he wants us all to exist in harmony. So today we will continue that journey, and hopefully at the end of this discussion, we'll be better at living together in harmony.
Thank you, Dr. Ohiro, for such a generous introduction. I think basically, we all are human beings and practical and aware human beings. Whatever we do in our life, it's a part of life. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I know it's nighttime in India, so good morning to you, but namaste.
Namaste.
And so following each presentation, there will be, the first presenter will be Reverend Dr. Rivera. And after his presentation, there'll be a few minutes of questions and answers. And then we'll have a more extended session of questions and answers after Dr. Vats. As each presents, I urge our participants today to list their questions in the Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. I also urge everyone to engage actively in the chat room throughout the duration of the webinar. Dr. Rivera, I have seen many people wish you a happy birthday. And I am jealous because my birthday is tomorrow and nobody has said happy birthday. But thank you all very much. So Dr. Rivera, you're now on deck. So tell us what we need to know about the essence of life.
Thank you, Ohiro. And by the way, somebody did wish you a happy birthday.
Really? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, I am happy to be here. This is the first time I am part of an international forum such as this one. And I'm not going to lie, since we have been emphasizing the fact that even with all the accolades that we receive, we're still human as everyone else. Along with the humanity, I am a little fearful this morning, but I'm hoping that as we proceed, that fear will dissipate and I will feel comfortable. I thought that being behind a camera and a computer would kind of save me from fear, but no, it's still there. It's just so wonderful that I can be a part of this international a body of people who, in their own context, are living life in such a way that they mirror a way of being that is healthy for our societies today. I'm just going to point out some things here that I've been thinking about. Like many of you, my journey has been a long time. I mean, I've been in church since I was 14 years old. And if you were to look me up 25 years ago, I would have been a totally different person in terms of my thinking, of my practice, of my theology, and my understanding of God, the world, and humanity. I consider myself still in a process of change. My beliefs and understanding are tentative at this time. They are continually changing as I grasp or grapple with what's going on in the world. In my own personal introspection and my own studies, I find myself constantly revising my thoughts and beliefs. And I think this is something good, because as humans, we are constantly evolving into better states of understanding one another. Now, I'm going to be speaking, of course, as a pastor, as a practical theologian, because that's been my field of work for 15 years. Before that, I was involved in many areas of church ministry as a layperson, but since 2006, I've been doing pastoral work, and it is from this perspective that I address the issue of living life, as Ohiro put it, which is a very daunting topic, and I am honored to be part of this conversation. Now, as again, as talking from the perspective of a minister, a person who takes theology and creates meaning within the community, I am called to see how the theological understandings of God, the world, and humanity are played out in faith communities, and that's been my job for now over 15 years. But I think that with the current pandemic and other crises that have taken hold of our cultures, I'm talking specifically from the standpoint of here of the United States, not only the pandemic, but the deep-rooted racism that exists. I'm sure most of you are aware of the shootings in Atlanta and how law enforcement is really holding back in declaring this a hate crime. But many religious leaders like myself have no doubt that this is related not only to an extreme form of misogyny, but also a hate crime that is always associated with misogynist views and behavior. They're always connected. But I think as a church, we have to address and address certain areas of thought and practice that I think are essential to begin to define what it is to live in our world today. Now, I'm going to start off with the issue of hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is it means, it talks about interpretation of text. That is its origins. I was brought up to view hermeneutics or interpretation of our sacred scripture, the Bible, as a tool that would help me understand what I am reading. That's the tradition I was brought up in. But recently I have been rediscovering or questioning that position. Going back to Friedrich Schleiermacher, who is considered the father of modern theology or liberal theology. Schleiermacher said that hermeneutics is not so much about understanding the text, but misunderstanding the text. That's why we need a tool for interpretation, because we are constantly misinterpreting sacred texts such as the Bible. This is something that I have seen across the board in my experience, both as a lay person and which is a non-clergy person and a clergy person. I am developing an idea of hermeneutics known as a hermeneutics of disruption. In other words, trying to address or teach the people that when we interpret a sacred text, we do it in a way that disrupts the way we view reality, the way we understand the world, the way we relate to the other. And this disruption questions our own philosophical underpinnings in the area of human life. Now, with this idea of hermeneutics of disruption, there is also the notion of what is known as cold hermeneutics. And when I first heard this, it really got me cold in a very literal sense. Cold hermeneutics is a form of interpretation in which we look at the world, the reality of what's going on, and we see it, we address it, we confront it, and we live our lives to the best of our abilities, helping each other, addressing the issues, but coming together as a people to bring ideas and solutions to the problems we face in the 21st century. Cold hermeneutics is a total contradiction of the traditional form of hermeneutics, where we look at God, we look at this idea of transcendence, of metaphysics, as a way to deal with the cold facts of life. Cold hermeneutics criticizes that position by saying that we shouldn't turn to any power beyond ourselves to deal with the issues of hand, but that we have to come together as a civilization to deal with the problem, to address the crisis. For if we do not, we will not last very long on this earth. There's the other idea also, something that I've just mentioned, transcendence, this idea of a God who is beyond our senses, beyond our human understanding. And there are a number of scholars who are looking at this idea of a God who is distant from us. There's a book entitled Beyond Transcendence that is co-edited by a philosopher by the name of John Caputo, in which the intention or the purpose of the writings in this anthology is to try to eliminate transcendence, bring God, the God that we serve, as a God who is distant from us, and bring him close to us. A God that is in our grasp, a God that is experienced in our everyday living, in concrete human situation, a God that can be experienced in the other. You know, I am always reminded of the Jewish story, the rabbinical story of a man who comes to a rabbi and says, "Where can I find the Messiah?" And his answer is, "Go to the city gate, hang out with those people there, and you will find the Messiah." And when he comes back, he said, "I don't understand what you're talking about. I was there, I spoke to these people, but I didn't see the Messiah." He says, "You did see the Messiah. You saw it in the faces of the people that were at the city gate. Each one of those individuals carries the essence of the Messiah." That's what I mean about eliminating transcendence and bringing God down to our level. And then another point that I think the church has to address and develop in a crucial manner is this idea of the gift of the other. Especially here in the United States, the other is seen with suspicion, is persecuted, is targeted, especially when the other brings ideals, brings practices, mostly religious practices, that are different from the standard notion or understanding of what this country understands as God. We have to begin to view the other as a gift, not as an enemy, not as a person who is there to contradict our own sense of life, but as a person who can contribute to our understanding of life. And then I think there has to be, at least from the Christian perspective, a reimagination of Jesus. And what I mean by that is that the church has to begin to develop an understanding of Jesus, of what can be called a thick Jesus, a Jesus that you can get a handle on, a Jesus that you can understand, a Jesus that comes from our own struggles and our own crises as human beings. Now, it was James Cone. James Cone was a professor of theology at Harvard, who in his book, The Lynching Tree, wrote about this idea of a Black Jesus, that for him, Jesus was a Black person. Professor Miguel de la Torres, who is a professor of New Testament in Colorado, he uses the same concept, but changes it a bit. He says that for him, Jesus is Cuban. Now, when a lot of people hear that, they immediately ask, but how can Jesus be Black? How can he be Cuban? For me, Jesus is Puerto Rican. How can Jesus be a Puerto Rican? And what this means is, it's not really talking about ethnicity in a literal sense, but what it's saying is that our understanding of Jesus must come from our context of struggle, of disenfranchisement, of living in the margins, because the Jesus of Scripture seems to fit these descriptions. A marginalized Jew, a poor Jew, a Jew who was persecuted, a Jew who was targeted, and at the end was murdered because he stepped on political toes that he wasn't supposed to step on. So this is a view of Jesus that must be approached, must be developed, must be implemented if we are to see results in our world today. And finally, I think that the church has to try to understand or try to accept and open themselves to other horizons of interpretation. It was Hans Gadamer, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, who in a sense established a foundation for doing hermeneutics, for doing interpretation. See, Hans Gadamer, one of the things that Hans Gadamer taught was, in order for you to understand the text, you have to walk in the shoes of the text. And this is especially significant, or specifically significant, for Christians. In order to really experience the text, or what the text is trying to communicate to you, you have to walk in the shoes of the person who wrote the text, who wrote it not only to express their intention, but according to Gadamer, who wrote it for people of other generations so that they could interpret it according to their context. I think that the church must explore other horizons of interpretation. And I'm going to include some of them here, because by exploring these horizons, we get a look not only at Scripture, we get a look at the world, we get a look at people, we get a look at life from other perspectives. I'm talking about looking at things from a feminist view. And in turn, within feminism, we include ecofeminism. We have to look at reality from the viewpoint of the female who has been neglected, who has been rejected, who has been persecuted, who has been belittled in many of our cultures. There are many female theologians and scholars who are right now viewing scriptures and reality from the viewpoint of the woman. And with that, they're looking at aspects of ecology, because somehow, and this is for another conversation, ecology and misogyny are intricately related. We also have to look at reality from a womanist perspective. And here, when I mention womanist, it's a little different from feminism, because womanist theology focuses on Hispanic, Asian, and women of color from their perspective, from their context. We have to consider also horizons of queer theology, the LGBTQ community and their scholars, and what they have to say about life. The view from the perspectives of the transgender movement, post-colonial theologies, those societies that were under the rule of empire, what they have to say about life and how to live it. Asian theologies. I think that when we open our theological and practical horizons to these other views of life, I think we can get a better perspective, and we can establish a better foundation to live life that can provide equitable resources for everyone on this earth. Thank you.
I see a question for you, Dr. Rivera. Thank you very much for that presentation. The question is, what do you think is the biggest threat to Christianity today? Personally, I think it's idolatry, but what do you think? That's the question.
Well, again, I'm speaking from from the context of the United States. Right now here, there may be other threats around the world where Christianity is practiced. And Ohiro, I agree with you. In part, it is idolatry, and not necessarily the worship of idols, but the worship of money, greed, selfishness, and this idea of omnicompetence, which can be seen as idolatry. But I think here in this country, one of the big threats of Christianity, in my opinion, is religious fundamentalism. Religious fundamentalism, as many of you saw in the Capitol riots on January 6th, was a clear indication of the danger of mixing fundamentalism with religious understandings, such as fundamentalism, because fundamentalism, among other things, one of the dangers that it poses is the literal interpretation of Scripture, the disregard for context, the disregard for historical understanding, for cultural knowledge of the text, socioeconomic realities that took place when the text was written, when the story was written. So for right now, without being extensive, I think that that's one of the dangers, where people take the Bible for granted and they do not approach it in a critical fashion. And what I mean by that is that even though the text, the Scripture is a canon and a faith for those who are considered Christians, I think that the Bible has to be approached critically in order to weed out those things that are incompatible with pursuing life in a way that benefits all human beings.
Thank you very much. That question and the feeling that idolatry was the biggest issue didn't really come from me. It came from another Dr. Oni-Eseleh, who is my older brother, right? But here I have a question. We have a question from Canada. This is from Brampton in Ontario. It says, Dr. Rivera seems to be coming from the angle of postmodern Christianity, which seeks to redefine the fundamentals of the faith. Are there absolutes in the Bible that cannot be classified as fundamentalism?
Again, I consider myself a progressive Christian. And that was a process that took many years. I began my journey as an evangelical fundamentalist. And for me, everything in the Bible was absolute. I'm going to be very, very frank with you. That question for me is difficult to answer because the response to that, it's still in process in my life and in my understanding of God. I also have elements in my theology of process thought or process theology. And process theology seems to undermine this idea of absolute. In process theology, all things are relative. Nothing is absolute, which sounds more like a postmodern type of understanding of religion. But right now I'm grappling with the issues that I have with this idea of absolutism. I'll give you an example right now. I don't believe in an omnipotent, omnipresent, and infinite God. I think those are Aristotelian categories that crept into the theology of the church. I think that the God of the Bible is a very down-to-earth, human-like presence or being. I believe that Scripture is not inspired by God. I believe that Scripture is part and parcel of a cultural context of a people who experience some type of religious awakening in their life, tapped into some type of spiritual consciousness, and gave their interpretation of what they thought that meant in their life and in their communities. And that's where we have the Bible. I think that the Bible is a relative book, a book that was not intended to be read by people other than the Jewish people. Once that those writings and those letters, those prophetic documents got out of that context and were translated, I think that they were then interpreted and lived out in contexts that were alien, in my opinion, alien to the intentions of the authors who penned those works. I really think that that is a good question. But like I said, it's something that I'm grappling with now because I am a pastor of a church and I have to be careful what I say from the pulpit. But it's something that I'm personally dealing with on another level of study and research.
Thank you very much for that sincerity. There is something that, we are going to go to Dr. Vats to make his presentation, but you did say something that I think that Dr. Vats and you can probably expand on later, because I think that that's probably where your presentations will actually meet. You talked about the pandemics that we currently have, not just the COVID pandemic, but also the pandemic of racism. So my question, and I'll put this on the table, I'll go to Dr. Vats, you don't have to answer this, and so we can discuss that later. As you talked about the elimination of transcendency, and you talked about otherism, as we otherize people that are not us. So my question, as I think about that concept and follow it through, I am wondering if you think that one pandemic is going to end, the pandemic of COVID is going to end, and the pandemic of racism is going to continue as it seems to have intensified. And it also reminds me of the fact that the current president of the United States has said, for example, he has said many times, if you just wear a mask, you take the vaccine, it's not just for you. It should just also, you should just do it as your sense of responsibility to others, because we are all in this together, and let us also protect other people. So I wonder if you think that that's a stab at otherism, and if we actually just practice that, we might see ourselves as brothers and sisters trying to protect one another and live in harmony, which is really one of the causes that Dr. Vats continues to pursue as he tries to get us all to exist in harmony. So at some point, I would like to come back to this discussion of otherism and what it means for life and living, and the existence of our world as it continues to travel on a journey that some of us are not really encouraged by. But Dr. Vats, you're on deck.
Thank you, Dr. Ohiro. My namaste and my regards to Dr. Ohiro and Dr. Hector and all the audience were there. I fondly remember last year when I was there in New York on the birthday of Dr. Ohiro. I'm really grateful that for 3-4 days as I was there, he treated me as a family, and it was such a nice experience to be with a brother on his birthday. I wish you a happy birthday, Dr. Ohiro, in advance, and definitely I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Thank you, Dr. Vats.
Okay. I have not made any formal presentation for this, but definitely because the issue is we are here to talk about essence. Exactly. Let me switch it off. I think there is. I'm really sorry. The phone was disturbing, so I had to switch it off. Okay, so we are here to talk about the essence of life, re-evaluating what life is and what living it in the times that have been forced upon us by this pandemic. When it started, incidentally, when the COVID started, I was traveling internationally. That time, I talked to Dr. Ohiro when I was in, Houston airport that time. So when it was about to be closed down, the very next day it was to be closed down. I went there, I traveled just challenging my common sense. I simply, I thought that, okay, let me see what happens, but definitely, God spared us all together, and now we are healthy, and again, we are together, we are talking. As far as life is concerned, and this pandemic, and the kind of situation is threw upon us, we are here to explore, the point like what life really means, what living is, what our responsibilities are as human beings. while we live. With so much death from the pandemic, I know that there has been a lot of questioning and rethinking. There is a lot of questioning and rethinking about existence and about the end of life. Let us address this from various angles. I would like to talk it from the angle of religion, from the practicality, from the view of practicality. COVID came as, largely as a tragedy upon us. It forced us to look at life in a very new way, with a sudden break in our usual and normal life. We were forced with a situation where we were to take decisions, in fact, as professionals, as a family person, as religious people, or in whatever situations we were forced to take decisions. For some, it provided with a breathing break to refresh us, to reinvent ourselves. As some of us who were in comfortable situations, in comfortable jobs, those who could afford it, it was good for us sometimes. And those who, of course, did not fall sick. But for so many of us, it came as a catastrophe, putting us in a situation where we had to survive. It was a matter of survival for us. For a large chunk of population, it was a matter of survival. Those who were not in regular jobs, those who were doing small businesses, I'm talking about the small places and small towns, where people had to struggle on day-to-day basis for their survival, and lockdown came. Mask became the new reality. And of course, it is a new reality now, a new form of identity. Hand washing, sanitization, that has become a new ritual, a new religion for us. Vaccine is a new age panacea with no promise of immunity. There's no certain promise. Of course, they say, okay, you get vaccinated. People are getting vaccinated. We have faith in our scientists, in our doctors. But again, medical people only say that there is no promise that it will work, because again, new mutants are coming. Now, let us look at life in this scenario. What is the purpose of life? When you talk of purpose of life, the best thing that comes to my mind as a teacher and a person who has lived life for more than 50 years, the best purpose of the life is to live it. And rest all is politics. Life is as it comes and live it. To live life is qualified by the condition that living life without imposing your ideas as a toolkit to improve, to correct, or to dispose of other people's life. This is the condition of life, of living life. There is nothing like improvement or correction about life. History will tell us how many corrections were made, how people were out to correct lives of others. If we try to bring about any radical correction or improvement ideologically, physically, there are bound to be shamefully violent occurrences, killings on the name of religion, by paganizing people or by kafirizing people. And history is the proof of it. Or annihilation or dehumanization of other people for political gains, or invention of weapons to perpetuate hegemonies, monopolies, or terror, or invention of chemical drugs, which eventually proved to be life-threatening. I stress this point here. Invention of chemical drugs which eventually proved to be life-threatening after some people have comfortably made a lot of money and assets. And then all of a sudden, in some journal, some article will come and say, oh my God, this drug was being taken for 20 years. Now I declare it as a poison. It is life-threatening now. Whatever will happen to the people, those who have been consuming it. So all these examples are the results of looking at life as something to be controlled or something to be manipulated. What is the alternative? Alternative is what I could, if I try to coin a word or think of a new term, that is experimental humanity. There is no religion in threat. Humanity is in threat. So it is experimental humanities. That is, turn inwards. In fact, when we try to turn outwards, we are bound to disturb other people's life. Whenever we look outside, expectantly to control the things around us, we are bound to disturb. So the best thing is, in my mind, is turning inward. Experimental humanity is a state when I focus on my personal experience with myself and my surroundings included. When I closely watch my ideas, if these ideas are inclusive or not, and if these ideas are practical enough to achieve the universal well-being. This emotion is nicely stated in a scripture in India, our ancient scriptures with thousands and thousands of years ago. This was written. We call it Vrihadaranyaka Upanishad. And the hymn is 1:4:14. It says, first I will read in Sanskrit, then I'll tell the meaning. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasjit dukh bhag bhavet. It means, may all be happy. May all be free from illness. May all see what is auspicious and pure. May no one suffer. The Indian way of looking at human life and living life is to turn inward and focus its four aspects. If I try to look at life, there are four aspects of life. One is dharma. Of course, it is wrongly translated into English as religion. Religion is something else. Religion means faith. Dharma is not religion. It is way of life. Actually, dharma means it is explained. Dharyate iti dharma. I mean, that which encompasses is dharma. That which sustains and that which can be sustained without disturbing others is dharma. So I don't think it has anything to do with faith. So it's just a way of living. Some major religions of the world, they say that all are born, they talk about cardinal sins. And somebody has to, the Lord had to sacrifice himself just to deliver us. But Sanatan Dharma, which is supposed to be the oldest Dharma, oldest religion of the world, it says that fundamentally, we are reflections of God. We are the parts of God. It talk about Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahma, means I am the Supreme Soul, because I'm part of the Supreme Soul. A particle has all the characteristics of the ocean. A drop of water has all the characteristics of the ocean. If we say the God is ocean, Paramatma, the Supreme Soul, then we individual souls contain all the properties of the Supreme Soul. In fact, erroneously, we try to relate religion with temples, with churches, with mosques, with the buildings. Buildings are not religions. A building is not dharma. Because somebody may be going to a temple or a church and may remain religionless. Like a person may be daily going to a school, but may remain uneducated. Because just going to the school is no guarantee of education. Experimental or practical humanity, as I was talking about, it talks dharma as acting righteously. It defines humanity as acting righteously to the virtues and attributes of one's conditions. Because they say that everything depends for its existence upon three coordinates. One is time, place, and circumstances. If any of the coordinate changes, the property changes. Similarly, whatever is written in scriptures, whatever is inscribed in books, however ancient a book is, it should be seen, it should be placed in three coordinates: time, place, and circumstances. Because the times, times are changing rapidly now. Of course, for last 2 or 3 decades, the change is more rapid. The places are changing, the circumstances are changing. Hence, Reverend Hector is saying rightly that it is to be re-looked into. So normally there are 4 ways. There are, 4 aspects of life. One is, as I said, one is dharma. Dharma means right way, righteous way of doing things. Next is arth. Arth means prosperity and success, gaining wealth from the lawful means. Then kam. Kam means desire, pleasures. Pleasure not sexual essentially. Pleasures, gaining pleasures, it ranges from art, sports, music, dance, socializing, and of course, sexual pleasure, because that perpetuates life. And then moksha. Moksha is the last aspect of life, that is liberation, gaining enlightenment, salvation. So how do we look at these 4 aspects of life in the changing scenario post-pandemic? This is important. What will happen to dharma? That is, okay, let us loosely equate it with religion. But whatever will happen to the religion after the pandemic has happened, after a lot of changes has happened. As I told you, because coming of pandemic means it is the 3rd coordinate: time, place, and circumstances. Pandemic changed the circumstances. So I think dharma or religion also should undergo, or at least our insight about it should undergo some changes. Similarly, earth. Earth means earning, how to earn our bread, how to attain success, how to bring prosperity, how to sustain life with material means. This has to be looked into again, because businesses are falling, new businesses are coming up. Because I could see that when this lockdown was happening, some businesses were doing remarkably well, and some businesses simply crumbled. People lost jobs and all that. Moksha, liberation. The very idea of liberation, the very idea of freedom is changing now. Because how you look at liberation, how you consider yourself being liberated, that is important. And as far as vision of life is concerned, how to look at life. You see, Christianity says that there are sins, and we have to, somebody has to deliver it, God has to deliver it. Then there is a different tradition that came to India that was called shaman parampara. Buddhism is one of it. Buddhism says that life is nothing but, it is full of miseries. Life is misery. And we have to somehow resolve it. We have to come over it. We have to have some kind of treatment. Gautam Buddha says that actually you are not happy. Actually, you are surrounded by miseries. You come to me, I will tell you the right ways of coming over it. There is one more tradition, very ancient tradition, as I told, Sanatan Parampara. It says that life is celebration. Life is celebration, Brahmanand. Because Anand means happiness. You, as you are part of God,
So God himself is Anand. God himself is happiness. So life is happiness. You are born happy. You're not born with some kind of negativity. You are born happy. So celebrate life. You live life fullest. But again, the condition is you should not disturb other people's life. You should not try to control other people's life. You should not try to resolve, correct, or save somebody's life. Let the person do it for himself or herself. So people talk about now, I mean, post Corona, people are talking about greatness of technology. Of course, technology is great. And I mean, n number of times I've heard people in various seminars and conferences and workshops that how great technology is and how it is saving time. Of course, technology is saving time. But I want to ask, what do we do with that saved time? What good that saved time has done to us? I'm not able to find suitable answer to it. If we took 2 hours in walking to a certain place, and if we acquire a car and reach there for say 15 minutes time, so in most of the times you will find the remaining time that we say that we have saved it, that is simply wasted. Or again, it is used in some kind of other tensions or some professional things. What good it does to you? So I think the best way to look at life post Corona is to be happy, to talk about our environment more than talking about technology. Talk about environment. This is more important. Talk about, I mean, one more thing, of course, that comes to my mind, because after the pandemic, you see every household has acquired, almost every household has acquired Wi-Fi. And you see we are in 24/7 exposure of radiations. We have no respite from internet. We have no respite from radiations. And I mean, this is how we are surrounded by. I don't mean that we should shun technology, but this is what has happened. I mean, 1 year ago, we would chide our kids saying that, okay, don't use these mobile phones too much. Don't use laptops too much. But now we only provided them with extra laptops and phones so that they could be in front of the screen the whole day, attending to their school classes and doing their homework. Now, I mean, all the physical work, I mean, I'm holding the pen in my hand. I think I have held the pen in my hand maybe in 10 days time, because nowadays most of the work is on keyboards. And today I feel so divine holding a pen in hand, being a teacher. So main thing is we are talking too much about internationalism. We are talking too much about globalization. It is more a globalism, in fact, not globalization. It is not. It is more internationalism. And I mean to say that are we not talking about some kind of bogus regionalism, and some kind of bogus kind of religiosity sometimes? I mean, new ways of looking at certain things, but in absurd ways. Why I use the word, the strong word bogus? Because I always see what is the practical end to it. I mean, what good it will do to our fellow humans. Whatever I am doing, whatever technology I'm acquiring, if I purchase a new car, I'm always thinking what good it is adding to my environment. What will it do? So thing is, when we talk of self and other, definitely there has to be self and there has to be other self. But we say self and other. Instead of saying it myself and other person's self, we just simply, we remove the other two qualifiers and we say self and then we say other. Problem is, why can't we look at other as our extension? The problem is, other is not our opposite. Other is our extension. Of course, a comfortable position is, let us look at other as different. Of course, not inferior or superior, but why even different? Other is our extension. Aham Brahmasmi, Tvam Brahmasmi. I am the Supreme Soul, you also are a Supreme Soul. I understand it is very difficult to believe in it. I mean, looking at our prejudices, the way have been living, and the kind of racism, the kind of differences that have been created, it is difficult to do it, but it's not impossible. Looking at something with a positive mindset, it's not impossible. So main thing is, there are two positions. One is we humanize God. Other is we divinize humans. Which position is good? Do we divinize humans or we humanize God? I think there is a third position. Let us equate ourselves with everything. Everything equal, everything is interrelated. Even God is the part of us and we are part of God. If we have this outlook, I think we can do a far better thing to the God. Normally, when we place a person in this world, Professor Ohiro comes from social sciences background and he's a psychologist. He understands it. And Dr. Hector uh, understands even better still, that when we place a person's identity in this world, we place it in two coordinates, coordinate of space and religion. Otherwise, you tell me what is the another way of, because whenever we meet a person, we first try to find out which place the person comes from. We place the person in a space, a geographical place. And third, unconsciously somewhere we will try to find out the person's faith through the person's name or somehow from some identity markers. So generally in this world, generally I'm speaking, a person's identity is placed in the coordinates of space and religion. Let us find out another way, some other ways of placing a person's identity in this world. Post-pandemic, I think we should become far better, with better sanity, with more compassion. Of course, that has been a tragedy, that has been a catastrophe on the humanity. It took so many lives, but so many diseases took so many lives. This is not the unique one. That has been happening, of course. So I mean, whatever deaths have happened, of course, our empathies, our sympathies, and we are the part of, I mean, tomorrow it can happen with anybody, because day before yesterday, I met a person, my colleague, whom I saw after 10 months time during this, because we have been working online. So he looked very weak. He's Professor Sanjay. So I asked him, what happened to you? And to my shock, he told that all of a sudden, it was declared that I am corona positive. I went to hospital for some treatment. I isolated myself. I recovered. After he recovered, he felt, all of a sudden, he felt so weak. Then he was almost semi-conscious. He was taken to hospital, and eventually he has to undergo a bypass surgery. Having the bypass, he came back, he recovered, but again, he became COVID positive. Now the person is almost half of his earlier weight. He lost half of the weight. And I mean, it was so painful to look at his face. So I mean, when some bad thing is happening with our own people, of course, this is bad. The pandemic has brought a lot of insecurities. But I think, I mean, as a common human being who would always like to live among our fellow human beings without philosophizing things, without without imposing, so many theories on the things. I'm of the view that let us understand life firsthand, and let us understand or try to find out means and ways to deal with the situation and place human beings in a new way. Let us free them from the coordinates of religion and space and race, of course. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Vats. I have a bunch of questions for you, and I think that some of them you've already spoken to. There is one also from Canada. Well, from Canada, it says, Dr. Vats, would you say that COVID-19 and all of its fallouts have made you better or worse or a different person? Are you maintaining the status quo, Auntie? Or have you evolved as a man?
I don't think I can pass any judgment on myself, but what I feel is I am a better person. I have started, I think, empathizing more than before. I think I have started caring for my near and dear ones more than before. See, not only my family members, I believe that I must have texted to Dr. Ohiro more than before Corona and called him and to check on whether everything is all right. I think if this is the marker of my understanding that I am a better person, definitely I have emerged as a better person after Corona.
Okay, I have another question. We have very active people in Canada this morning. This is also from Canada. Are there philosophical and psychological dimensions that you have observed that can or should redefine or adjust our relationships or how we live going forward post-pandemic? Should I repeat that question or you got it?
Oh, yeah. If better if you repeat once again.
Right. It says, are there philosophical and psychological dimensions observed that can or should redefine or adjust our relationships or how we live going forward? I know that you talked about the importance of us focusing more on the environment now than on technology, and talking about how to live together more in harmony. But I'm sure that there are some things you'd like to add in direct response to this question.
See, as far as philosophical engagement with life is concerned, a lot of philosophy has been talked about. Thing is, let us simplify the act of philosophization. Thing is, there should be only one philosophy. As I told you, I mean, this is the simplest way I have evolved in understanding things. That let us keep the disturbance to others' life to the minimum. As you know, a surgeon today, a good surgeon will say that let us have minimal incision in the surgery. Similarly, let us have minimal interference in other people's belief and faiths. Rest, everything will take care of it. It depends upon. Moreover, it applies to even international relations, not only interpersonal. If one nation does not interfere with the internal working of another nation, instead of this, people should be ready to help. In India, I think, I mean, seeing the status of our vaccine program is concerned, that what I read from the newspapers and find out from my colleagues who are scientists, that I mean, India is trying its best to provide vaccines to the people, to so many countries who need it. We people are doing our best in order to help government by through donation or through whatever way government wants. We are ready and we are doing help. So I think this is my perspective. As far as international relations are concerned, I think as a common citizen, we can hardly do anything in that matter.
Right. There's another question for you. This is from New York. It says, you talked about looking inwards and not outside. This sounds very reclusive and anti-change. Could you please clarify that statement in light of the fact that you also brilliantly explained some of the changes that we have experienced since the pandemic? Do you think these changes are good?
See, whether these changes are good or not, this is too early to comment on it, because these changes are still happening. They have not happened. They are happening. They're in the process of happening. When the pandemic will go, and I think after some times we will be able to judge it, to evaluate it, whether the changes were good or not. I think right now we should be the part of these changes and dealing with these changes. I think passing value judgments, whether good or bad, I think this is too early.
Right. So, Reverend Rivera, Dr. Rivera, Reverend Dr. Rivera, I will have you answer this question that is from Winnipeg in Canada also. The question asks, will it be right to say that we are not showing enough love for others? Hence, we are experiencing more issues in our present day life experiences. Yeah, that's from Winnipeg, Canada.
Again, I think that's a very difficult question to answer, because it's subjective, and it's also I really don't know what motivates people to do what they do. And in a sense, love could be an instrument of control as well. And that's something that I've seen and experienced for myself. Definitely during this pandemic, I have seen people go out of their way, as Dr. Naresh said eloquently, to help others. But I think that sense of neighborliness, of embracing, and I love Dr. Naresh's understanding, not so much the other, but the person who's an extension of myself. I've seen that, but they also practice that even before the pandemic. So I really can't say that people are not showing enough love. Again, as Dr. Naresh says, we're still in the process of basically digesting what's been going on, and it's going to be some time where we'll be able to maybe make these assessments, but maybe we won't be able to. It's just we're dealing with the human condition, and there's a lot of variables there that are still out of our reach, in my opinion.
Right. So thank you very much. The other one also is for you, Dr. Vats. It says, your story about your friend is so moving and painful. Has his experience led to any soul searching and reprioritization in life?
Of course, the first thought that came to my mind is the spontaneity of life. How things can happen, even a second's notice. So that not changes, but soul searching that happened inside me told me that, there is nothing in the rat race that people are engaged in. It's better to do things keeping your fellow humans in mind. Otherwise, whatever will happen will happen.
Thank you. I have a question for you. This is my question to you. You said that the best purpose of life is to live it, which I thought was a fantastic way to actually get us focused on why we're here. And you said the rest of it is politics, which I think is a profound statement. So my question is it possible to live life without the politics? And since it appears that it may be very difficult to do that, how can we navigate life in the midst of everything else that the politics throws at us? All of the challenges and everything else, the rest of it, as you said, is politics.
See, living life does not mean that we are just lying down and eating and shitting and sleeping. When we live life, we are living life not in isolation, but in certain circumstances. I told you that there are three coordinates: time, place, and circumstances that define our life. If we are placed by life into a situation which is fraught by politics all over, and your existence depends upon your participating in those political happenings, so I don't know there is any other way of living life without indulging in politics. Living life, just living life means if you are thrown into water pond, in a pond full of water, how will you sustain life? By swimming. Very simple. If one is thrown into a situation, I mean, where one is faced with a particular circumstance, so definitely living life means behaving accordingly, behaving according to the circumstances you are in. As I told you, rest all is politics means once you are okay, you are happy and you can survive without disturbing others, but still you try to control other people and try to indulge in politics, definitely, then I mean, this is not good. And that is not the way. That's why I told that rest all is politics. Politics is when we try to, if I try to influence other people unduly, if I self-declare that, okay, I am there to save your life, and you come and I'll tell you how to do it, so then it is politics.
I thank you very much, Dr. Vats. I have someone who is an older gentleman that I would like to call on. He's in Maryland. He's also a pastor, but I think what I actually want to do is to introduce into this discussion what aging does. So I don't know if that's where he wants to go, or if he's going to be comfortable going there. What aging has meant in this process of reevaluating life in the era of COVID. And especially when we also consider the fact that, at least in the United States, a very high percentage of people who were very highly impacted, who have been very highly impacted, especially in the early stages, were older people. So I'm going to ask Reverend Kennedy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you please add something to this discussion? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but that's okay.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank the two presenters to the discussion. Actually, the pandemic has had great effect on the older population, as you mentioned. And as Dr. Vats said, life without politics is no life. And as many Christians, especially the elderly ones, they feel they can live only by praying to God, and everything will find its way. But experiencing the American life, you could see that American life is shadowed by politics more than any other thing. Decisions are made, even though we call ourselves Christians, yet our final thoughts and decisions are based on our political agendas rather than on humanity. So both speakers, you touch a vital point during this time, whereby the churches, especially which are trying to go back to the sanctuaries in order to worship, are forgetting that the God we worship is not in the sanctuaries. And as Dr. Vats said, Christianity is way of life. All religious lives are the way we approach one another in humility, in love, forgiveness, and trying to accept one another as people created in the same image of God. But again, during this pandemic, we saw a lot whereby each and everyone wanted to reach out to one person or the other. But my question to the end is that all we need after the pandemic? Will life no more continue? How are we going to regard and relate to one another with our political and religious backgrounds? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, that's, I think, a wonderful question. You know, I was in a forum recently, and I, I was talking about what we'll be doing in the post-pandemic era. And someone said, well, that's very interesting because you're an administrator, so you're already planning for the post-pandemic era. I am I'm a professor, so I'm thinking about here and now. I am not looking beyond this time, but you already are because you're an administrator. So it's very interesting that we're in the same space and we are thinking differently. But what Reverend Kennedy just asked, I think is very crucial. If you looked in your crystal ball right now, any of you, how do you think we'll be living beyond this period? Are we going to continue? Are we going to go back the way we were? I'm not sure if it's really going back because we just saw Capitol Hill stormed. We just saw that many things are still happening. But if you consider it as going back to the way we lived, is that what we are going to do? What is your crystal ball telling you? Or do you think that we're all going to go into a different space as different people, which is what has been some of the crux of the questions that you've got from Canada, especially from Brampton, Canada today. So I leave that. Who wants to go with that? Who has a crystal ball and can predict what the future is going to be like? Okay, Dr. Vats, when I'm looking at you, you should know it's your turn to speak.
Actually,
are we all going to be better people after this and just live differently?
We certainly are going to be better people because we are always emerging. We have always emerged. I believe in thinking positively. Problem is, if we try to pass value judgments on whether the life before pandemic was better or was good, or life during pandemic was good, or life after, how it will be after pandemic. Life will go on. Pandemic was part of it as it was earlier. In 1919 or 1907, there was pandemic, or before that also in India, the Spanish flu, and elsewhere in the world. Life just went on. Only thing is how we respond to our environment. That is the question. Because I think the word saying that will be better or not, it's a matter of curiosity. Let us be curious. You will see in the background, in Hindi, it is written under, actually this is my platform, that is Global Foundation for Scholarship and Research, at a GFSR. And it is under this, it is written in Hindi, Athato Tattva Jigyasa. It means let us be curious. Let not our curiosity die. Whatever will come, will come. Now let us see how we are going to respond to it. This is more important. Let us be better prepared. Let's not fight with this. Let us respond to whatever is happening. If we start fighting with it, we are fighting with our own selves. Let us prepare ourselves. Let us prepare our environment. Let us prepare our fellow human beings. And in this preparation, if we are spending another, say, 20, 25 years, so definitely that will be the time. I mean, considering our age, pardon my words if the statement is not liked. Considering our age, say 25 years or maybe 30 years or maybe after 20 years, that it will be the time for us to go, right? But by that time, if we have responded to the life, to our circumstances positively in a human manner. So I think the life will be best, best lived. And let us live by example.
Right. Consistent with that position of curiosity and being curious for as long as we live, there's a question also for you, Dr. Vats. It says, looking beyond a person's space and religion is an amazing concept that came from you. This question says, that's an amazing concept, but it's not the norm. So how would you suggest to begin this process as a reshaping of society when that is rarely seen?
Let us start doing it. I mean, let us stop, or at least if not stop, let us try to stop fixing a person according to that person's race or according to the fact that from a particular geographical place that person has come. Let us stop trying to fix that person on this coordinate. Let us stop trying to fix the identity of the person as per the fact of the person's faith or religion. Let us start doing it. And I think it takes a lot of time, for something to become a norm. Whatever norms we have right now, they simply did not become so overnight. It took so many years, decades sometimes. So let's be hopeful. If we start, fixing identities, going beyond the space and religion, I think that will become, of course, that will become norm. I don't know after how much time or how much time it will take, but I'm sure it will be. Let's start doing it.
Okay. Oh, yes, Reverend Dr. Rivera.
I think that when I was speaking about hermeneutics of disruption, that's what I try to do as a pastor. I don't dictate how they believe, but I try to disrupt their belief system to look at things from a different perspective. And that's why I think I agree also that curiosity or questioning continues the pursuit of knowledge. When you have an absolutist concept of reality, you do not ask questions. You are not curious because you feel you've got all the knowledge you need. And that's one of the key problems with fundamentalist religion, that they have all the answers. I have Jesus, I have the truth, I don't need anything else. And I think that's a dangerous concept because it stops that process of knowledge, of growth. And again, one of the ways I do it is from the pulpit. In the pulpit, I try to, and Ohiro, sometimes I get in trouble because of that, because I disrupt people so much that they begin to question, and that's good. That's what I want. I want them to question. And like Dr. Naresh said, that is the process I use so that they can look inward, so that when they look outward, they can relate or just go with the flow in a certain sense, without destroying a person either because of race, creed, or what have you. But I think that's where the hermeneutics of disruption really, really helps me. The cold hermeneutics is what a lot of people are scared of. The cold hermeneutics means that underlying our institution is that moment where chaos can hit. It can hit, and our institutions mean nothing in the face of crisis. And that's why we as a people, as a civilization, again, as an extension of one another, have to come together to face this and work it out together.
Thank you very much. That actually leads me to something that I have been asked multiple times since you talked about your doubts regarding, or your position regarding the concept of God's omnipotence and omnipresence. And I have been asked multiple times if perhaps we will come back at some point to have that discussion, because this person is a little concerned about your position on the omnipotence and omnipresence of God. And perhaps we'll want to come back at some other point to have that discussion in greater detail. There is someone who would like to say something from Manitoba in Canada as well. Ms. Phillips?
I have some reservations in the sense that when you look at the current happenings in the society, I find that from past histories and from current situations, that some people are going to emerge from this situation unchanged. Some are also going to have the change because like the issue of vaccination and the benefits and stuff like that, some people are going to come out and say, okay, subsequently, they're going to be taking the vaccination like on a yearly basis or something of that nature to maintain the immunity, like flu vaccines and other vaccines that are out there in the society. While there are still some people who are going to remain unchanged from this very situation, like people having that fixed belief that, okay, it's like any other illness. Okay, so be it. COVID has come, COVID has gone. It is there permanently because from what is going on, nobody is really going to be able to say, oh, this is going to be off forever and ever. No, it's going to be like any other viral infection where you have the mutations and the variants, coming up, and vaccines probably with future being changed on a regular basis. So we don't really know. We're looking at the way forward, but we just say, okay, do all that medical science has said do, hope and pray in your God, and know that, okay, there are certain belief systems that some people are going to adhere to. That's from my own perspective. So I don't know what others have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, to pursue that further, I actually I saw a nurse on television who was talking about how shocked she was that there were people who were on their dying beds in the hospital where she works. They just had a short time to leave, yet they were still saying that COVID was a hoax, that COVID doesn't really exist. And this was because of their politics. So it seems to me that it sort of fits within what she just said. So it looks like some people are really not going to change despite everything that we've seen. So that is the last question, or you may want to comment. Do you agree with that position or you do not? I think Dr. Rivera wants to say something about that.
Yeah, I want to thank Ms. Phillips for that comment. It took a lot of courage, because as a pastor, I've changed. When more than 500,000 people die in this country, and I don't know what the number is around the world, I think it's in the millions. You have to question the idea of omnipotency. You have to question that. And I've seen people. As a pastor, I've come across people that even in the face of evidence, they continue to believe that the pandemic is a hoax, fed by an outgoing president who introduced the concept of fake news. That reminded me a lot of the writings of George Orwell's 1984. And it forced me to read that book again. And when I read the book, it is the first time I read a book in 2 days, because I felt that I was living what George Orwell was predicting in 1947. A culture of misinformation, a culture of fake news. Now they introduced a new term called cancel culture, which I'm still trying to grapple what that means. This is the politics that is involved in our society, American society. But in my opinion, it's more than politics. It's more than religion. It's about power and it's about money. It's always about that. It will always be about that. And that's why when you look at the history of the United States, when you look at the history of the Negro, when you look at slavery, when you look at the civil rights movement, it is about politics. It has to be about politics, a different brand of politics. I would call it the politics of Jesus. That's what the Negroes called it. That's what the civil rights leaders called it. That's what liberation theologians call it. The politics of Jesus. I had a bishop, and with this I'll end, a bishop once told me, because when I entered into this pastorate, I was still a conservative. And a bishop told me these words: everything you say is political. Everything. Even when you say you don't want to be political, you're being political in one way or another. And I've taken that to heart. So when I stand on a pulpit, I stand on a tradition that says we don't want to hear politics from the pulpit. And I understand that, but I respond to them. Everything we say is political. So that's what you're going to hear this morning, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Because that's the reality.
Wow. So that point where we're in is actually a place of strong agreement with Dr. Vats, who said, we just need to live life. Everything else is politics. I want to thank you very much and thank our participants who have joined us today from all of the countries where they have joined us from. And I really will not forget the very important things that you discussed here. That it's important for us to really show love and really try to stop otherizing and just show love and see others as ourselves and see ourselves in the lives of other people. And that we should respect the humanity of others and understand that the pandemic that we talk about is not just the pandemic of COVID, but it's beyond that. And also that it's important for us to live together in peace and harmony, and just really to be curious about the world that we live in, to be curious about life, and to respect the environment that we've been blessed to really be custodians of. I cannot thank you enough. And I know that for everyone that I know who has actually dealt with COVID, they'll tell you many things, including the fact that it changed them, that experience, just knowing that you really don't know what the next minute holds for you, that the next night will be, that night could be your last, and that the next day could be planning for your burial. How does that not change you? And for those of us, if we can just see ourselves through the lives of others, then we can begin to understand better, is the lesson that you have taught us today, that we can begin to understand better. It's consistent with what we call contact theory in my profession, which means that if you just have relationships with people who are less like you get to know them better, and then there'll be more harmony. So I am not sure where we go from here, but I expect that everyone who has been watching us on Facebook and everyone who's been here today participating in this will leave here with something. And my hope is that we continue to spread this awareness, and that we also continue to provide a platform to have discussions like this. So Dr. Naresh Vats, I know it's almost bedtime for you in India. For us here, it's still really early morning. I am glad that the two of you have met, and everyone else has also met you guys today. I want to thank you very much for this day, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So yes, we'll talk. Yes. So people are still commenting, but we have